When 7-year-old Penny Hartwell disappeared from her bedroom on October 15, 1991, she left behind only an open window and her beloved pink recording toy. Her mother, Ruth, searched everywhere, but Penny had vanished without a trace. 9 years later, Ruth still kept Penny's room exactly the same, hoping her daughter would come home. The recording toy sat silent on the nightstand, holding Penny's final innocent message from that last night. Then one morning in 2000, Ruth heard something that changed everything. The old toy was beeping by itself, like someone had just recorded a new message. When Ruth pressed play with shaking hands, she heard a voice that made her heart stop. It was Penny, but older now, whispering desperately through the static. "Mommy, help me. I'm still here." How could a child who vanished 9 years ago suddenly send a message through her old toy? And if Penny was really still alive somewhere, what terrible secret had kept her hidden for so long? Penny Hartwell pressed the small pink button on her favorite toy and whispered into the tiny speaker. "Mommy, if something bad happens, remember I love you more than all the stars in the sky." The 7-year-old girl giggled as she played back her own voice. She had been talking to her recording toy every night for months. It was her special friend that kept all her secrets safe. "And I love Daddy too," she added, recording another message, "even when he gets grumpy about work stuff." Penny's bedroom was painted light purple, her favorite color. Stuffed animals covered her bed. Pictures she had drawn at school hung on the walls. Her mom had put up glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, so Penny could count them before falling asleep. Outside her window, October wind made the tree branches dance. Halloween was coming soon, and Penny couldn't wait. She was going to be a princess this year, a brave princess who saved people, not one who waited around to be rescued. "Tomorrow I want to help Mommy make cookies," Penny recorded into her toy. The kind with chocolate chips that look like little smiles. Down the hall, Ruth Hartwell was washing dishes and thinking about her daughter. Penny was such a happy child, always laughing, always making up songs, always asking a million questions about everything. Ruth smiled as she heard Penny's voice drifting from the bedroom. "Ruth, is she still talking to that toy?" David called from the living room where he was watching the evening news. "She loves that thing," Ruth replied. "It makes her feel important, like she has someone special to talk to." David chuckled. "She talks enough for 10 kids already. Now, she's talking to toys too." But Ruth understood why Penny loved the recording toy so much. Her daughter was an only child who sometimes felt lonely. The toy gave her a way to share her thoughts and hear her own voice saying them back. It was like having a friend who always listened and never interrupted. Ruth finished the dishes and walked down the hall to Penny's room. She could hear her daughter still whispering to the pink device. "I hope Mrs. Miller gives us art time tomorrow," Penny was saying. "I want to draw a picture of our whole family, even Grandma who lives far away." Ruth knocked softly on the doorframe. "Time for bed, sweetheart." Penny looked up with bright brown eyes. Her dark hair was already messy from playing, and she had a small chocolate stain on her nightgown from dessert. "Just one more message, Mommy, please?" "Okay, but make it quick. Tomorrow is a school day." Penny nodded seriously and pressed the record button again. "Good night, little toy. Thank you for listening to all my stories today. Sweet dreams." Ruth sat on the edge of the bed as Penny put the recording toy on her nightstand. She tucked the covers around her daughter and kissed her forehead. "Did you have a good day at school?" Ruth asked. "Uh-huh. Tommy let me play with his action figures at recess, and I helped Sarah with her math because she was crying. Teacher said I was a good helper." "You are a good helper. You have a kind heart, Penny." "Mommy, why do some kids not have mommies and daddies?" Ruth paused. Penny often asked deep questions that were hard to answer. Well, sometimes sad things happen to families. But there are always people who care about children, even when their first families can't take care of them anymore. Like foster families? That's right. How do you know about foster families? Sarah told me. She said her cousin lives with a foster family now, and they're really nice to him. Ruth smoothed Penny's hair back from her face. There are lots of good people in the world who want to help children be safe and happy. Like you and Daddy helped me be safe and happy? Exactly. Like that. Penny yawned and snuggled deeper into her blankets. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, baby girl, more than all the stars in the sky. That's what I told my toy. Ruth laughed softly. Great minds think alike. She turned on Penny's small nightlight and turned off the main light. The glow in the dark stars on the ceiling began to shine softly. Mommy. Yes? Will you always find me if I get lost? The question made Ruth's heart squeeze. Always, Penny, no matter what. I would never stop looking for you. Promise? I promise with my whole heart. Penny smiled and closed her eyes. Okay. Good night, Mommy. Good night, sweetheart. Ruth left the door cracked open just a little, the way Penny liked it. She could hear David turning off the television in the living room. It had been a normal Tuesday evening in their small house on Maple Street in Millbrook. Ruth brushed her teeth and got ready for bed, thinking about what she needed to do tomorrow. Pack Penny's lunch, drop her off at school, go to work at the insurance office, pick up groceries on the way home. Normal things that normal families did every day. At 11 o'clock, Ruth got up to check on Penny one more time. It was something she did, every night before going to sleep herself. Just a quick peek to make sure her daughter was safe and sound. She pushed open Penny's door quietly and looked toward the bed. In the soft glow of the nightlight, she could see Penny sleeping peacefully. The pink recording toy sat on the nightstand where she had left it. Everything looked exactly as it should. Ruth smiled and gently closed the door. She went to bed feeling grateful for her beautiful family and looking forward to another ordinary day tomorrow. But when morning came, everything changed forever. Ruth woke up at 7 o'clock and made coffee, just like always. She called out to Penny that breakfast was ready. When there was no answer, she called again, louder this time. Penny, time to get up for school. Still no answer. Ruth walked down the hall and pushed open Penny's bedroom door. The bed was empty. The covers were thrown back like someone had gotten out in a hurry. The window was wide open, letting in cold October air. Penny? Ruth called, her voice starting to shake. She looked in the bathroom. She looked in the kitchen. She looked in every room of the house, calling Penny's name louder and louder. David woke up to the sound of Ruth shouting, "What's wrong?" "I can't find Penny. She's not in her room." They searched the house together, then the backyard, then the whole neighborhood. They called Penny's name until their voices were hoarse, but there was no answer. At 8:30, Ruth called the police. "My daughter is missing," she said, her voice breaking. "Her name is Penny Hartwell. She's 7 years old. She was in her bed last night, but this morning she's gone." The last thing Ruth noticed before the police arrived was something that would haunt her for years to come. Penny's beloved recording toy was still sitting on the nightstand, exactly where she had left it the night before. But now it seemed to be staring at Ruth with its tiny speaker, holding all of Penny's secrets and the echo of her last recorded words. The night everything changed had become the morning everything ended. The police arrived at the Hartwell house within 10 minutes of Ruth's call. Officer Jenkins was the first one through the door. He was a tall man with kind eyes who had 2 daughters of his own. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need you to tell me exactly what happened," he said, pulling out a small notebook. Ruth's hands shook as she spoke. Penny was in her bed when I checked on her. At 11 last night. This morning at 7 she was gone. Her window was open. Officer Jenkins walked into Penny's bedroom and looked around carefully. He examined the open window and checked the yard outside. There were no footprints in the soft dirt below the window, no broken branches on the bushes, no signs that anyone had climbed in or out. "Could Penny have opened this window herself?" he asked. "Maybe," David said. "But she's never done anything like this before. She wouldn't just leave." More police officers arrived. They searched every inch of the house and yard. They looked in closets, under beds, in the basement, and in the attic. They checked every hiding spot a 7-year-old might use. By 9 o'clock, the whole neighborhood was involved in the search. Mrs. Patterson from next door brought coffee for everyone. Mr. Henderson, the elderly man who lived on the other side, offered to help look through the nearby woods. "That little girl comes over to see my garden sometimes," Mr. Henderson said, shaking his head sadly. "Such a sweet child. I hope she's just hiding somewhere and will come home soon." The firefighters came with their truck and searched all the storm drains in the area. They looked in places too small for adults to fit, thinking maybe Penny had crawled somewhere and gotten stuck. Ruth couldn't sit still. She walked up and down Maple Street calling Penny's name. She knocked on every door, asking if anyone had seen her daughter. She looked behind every tree and under every porch. "Penny, Penny, come home. Mommy's not mad. Just come home." By afternoon, the story was on the local news. A reporter with bright red lipstick stood in front of the Hartwell house and talked into a camera. 7-year-old Penny Hartwell disappeared from her bedroom sometime during the night. Police are asking anyone with information to call immediately. Ruth and David sat on their couch and watched themselves on television. It felt like they were watching someone else's nightmare. The next day, volunteers came from all over town. They formed search groups and spread out in every direction. They looked in the woods behind the school. They searched the old abandoned barn on Miller's farm. They checked every building in downtown Millbrook. Mrs. Chen from the grocery store made sandwiches for all the searchers. The church ladies brought water bottles and snacks. Everyone wanted to help find Penny. Ruth carried flyers with pennies. Picture everywhere she went. She put them up on telephone poles and in store windows. She handed them out to every person she met. "Have you seen my daughter?" she would ask. "Her name is Penny. She's 7 years old. She has brown hair and brown eyes. She's wearing pink pajamas." Most people looked at the flyer sadly and shook their heads. A few said they thought they might have seen her, but when the police checked, it was always a different child or a mistake. Days turned into a week. The police brought in special dogs that could smell where people had been. The dogs sniffed Penny's clothes and her bed, then tried to follow her scent. But the trail went cold at the edge of the yard. "It's like she just vanished into thin air," Officer Jenkins told Ruth and David. "We've never seen anything like this." Ruth made more flyers. She called television stations in bigger cities. She begged them to show Penny's picture on the news. Some of them did, and Ruth's phone started ringing with tips from people who thought they had seen her daughter. Each phone call made Ruth's heart jump with hope. But every tip led nowhere. A girl at a gas station 3 towns over turned out to be someone else's daughter. A child seen at a playground was 2 years older than Penny. Every lead was a dead end. 2 weeks after Penny disappeared, David went back to work. "We need the money," he said quietly, "and sitting here isn't helping find her." But Ruth couldn't go back to her normal life. She took time off from her job at the insurance office. She spent every day searching and calling people and putting up more flyers. At night, she would sit in Penny's room and stare at the recording toy on the nightstand. She hadn't touched it since the morning Penny disappeared. She was afraid to hear her daughter's voice, afraid it would make the pain even worse. 3 weeks passed. A month. The volunteers slowly stopped coming. The police had other cases to work on. The reporters moved on to different stories. But Ruth never stopped searching. She drove to nearby towns and showed Penny's picture to store clerks and restaurant workers. She went to parks and schools, hoping to catch a glimpse of her daughter. "You need to accept that she might not come back," her sister Marion said during one visit. "You're making yourself sick." "Never," Ruth said firmly. "I will never stop looking for her. I promised Penny I would always find her if she got lost." David tried to be supportive, but Ruth could see the sadness growing in his eyes. At night, she heard him crying in the shower where he thought she couldn't hear. The house felt empty and quiet without Penny's laughter. Ruth left her daughter's room exactly the same, hoping that one day Penny would walk through the front door and everything would go back to normal. But as the weeks turned into months, that hope became harder and harder to hold on to. Winter came. To Millbrook. Snow covered the ground where searchers had looked for clues. Christmas decorations went up in store windows, but Ruth couldn't bear to celebrate anything. She kept a calendar on the kitchen wall and marked off each day Penny had been gone. 30 days, 40 days, 50 days. The numbers got bigger, but her determination never got smaller. On New Year's Eve, Ruth sat alone in Penny's room while David watched television downstairs. She finally picked up the pink recording toy and held it in her hands. "Where are you, baby girl?" she whispered to the silent device. "Mommy is still looking for you. Mommy will never stop looking." Outside, fireworks exploded in the distance as 1991 became 1992. But for Ruth Hartwell, time had stopped on that October morning when she found an empty bed and an open window. The search that was supposed to last a few hours had become her whole life, and deep in her heart, she began to have dreams where she could hear Penny's voice calling for help. The voice seemed to be coming from somewhere inside the house, somewhere close but impossible to find. Ruth didn't tell anyone about the dreams. People already thought she was spending too much time living in the past. But late at night, when the house was quiet and still, she was sure she could hear her daughter calling her name. The dreams got stronger as months passed. Ruth would wake up in the middle of the night, certain that Penny's voice had pulled her from sleep. She would lie in bed listening, hoping to hear it again. Sometimes she got up and walked through the house, checking every room. "Ruth, what are you doing?" David asked one night when he found her standing in the hallway at 3 in the morning. "I thought I heard something," she whispered. David rubbed his tired eyes. "Honey, there's nothing there. You need to get some sleep." But Ruth couldn't sleep. Every night was the same, dreams of Penny calling for help. The sound of a child's voice echoing through the empty rooms. The feeling that her daughter was somewhere close but just out of reach. David was getting worried about his wife. Ruth had lost weight because she forgot to eat. She had dark circles under her eyes because she couldn't sleep. She spent all day searching and all night listening for sounds that weren't there. "Maybe you should talk to someone," David suggested carefully. "A doctor or a counselor. Someone who can help you deal with all this." "I don't need to talk to anyone," Ruth said. "I need to find our daughter." "Ruth, it's been over a year. The police have looked everywhere. We've looked everywhere. Maybe it's time to think about moving on." Ruth stared at her husband like he had said the most terrible thing in the world. "Moving on? How can you even say that?" "I'm not saying we give up hope. I'm saying we can't live like this forever. We can't spend the rest of our lives waiting for something that might never happen." "She's coming back, David. I know it." David sat down heavily at the kitchen table. He looked older than he had a year ago. The stress and sadness had added lines to his face and gray to his hair. "What if she doesn't come back, Ruth? What if we never find out what happened to her? Are we going to live in this house forever, keeping her room like a museum?" "Yes," Ruth said, without hesitation, if that's what it takes. By the summer of 1992, their fights were getting worse. David wanted to pack up some of Penny's things and donate them to charity. Ruth refused to let him touch anything in their daughter's room. Other children could use these clothes and toys, David argued. Penny would want to help other kids. Penny is going to need her things when she comes home, Ruth replied firmly. David tried a different approach. What if we moved to a different house, started fresh somewhere new? We could take Penny's favorite things with us and set up a room for her. There. No. Ruth's voice was cold and final. What if Penny comes home and we're not here? What if she's looking for us and we're gone? Ruth, be realistic. If someone took Penny, they're not going to bring her back to this house. She's not going to just walk through the front door one day. You don't know that. You don't know anything. The arguments always ended the same way. David would try to be logical and practical. Ruth would get angry and walk away. Neither of them was hearing what the other really needed to say. David needed Ruth to admit that Penny might be gone forever. He needed them to grieve together and then find a way to build a new life. Ruth needed David to keep believing with her. She needed him to search with her and hope with her and never give up. But they were pulling in opposite directions, and their marriage was stretching until it felt ready to break. In the fall of 1992, David started working longer hours. He said it was because they needed the extra money, but Ruth knew he was avoiding coming home to a house full of sadness and empty rooms. Ruth got a part-time job at the library to help pay the bills. She liked being around books and quiet spaces. But even at work, she couldn't stop thinking about Penny. She kept her daughter's picture on her desk and showed it to every person who came in. "Have you seen this little girl?" she would ask. "Her name is Penny. She disappeared last year." Most people were kind but couldn't help. Some people started avoiding Ruth because they didn't know what to say. Others whispered about her when they thought she couldn't hear. "Poor Ruth Hartwell," they said. "She just can't let go." At home, Ruth and David barely talked anymore. They ate dinner in silence. They watched television without really seeing it. They went to bed at different times and woke up feeling like strangers. One evening in early 1993, David came home with papers from a lawyer. "What are these?" Ruth asked, though her heart already knew. "Divorce papers," David said quietly. "I can't do this anymore, Ruth. I can't live in a house where time stopped 2 years ago." Ruth felt like someone had hit her in the stomach. "You're leaving me." "I'm not leaving because I don't love you. I'm leaving because I still do love you, and I can't watch you disappear a little more every day." "But what about Penny? What about finding her?" "I will never stop hoping that Penny comes home safe, but I also can't spend the rest of my life sitting in this house waiting for that to happen." Ruth looked at the divorce papers with tears in her eyes. "So you're giving up on both of us?" "I'm trying to save what's left of myself," David said. "And maybe someday you'll understand that you need to save what's left of yourself too." David moved out the next week. He rented a small apartment across town and took only his clothes and a few personal things. He left everything else behind, including all the memories that filled every corner of their house. Ruth stood in the empty living room after David's truck disappeared down the street. The house felt even bigger and quieter now. It was just her and Penny's ghost and the pink recording toy that sat silent on the nightstand. That night, Ruth heard Penny's voice in her dreams again. But this time, the voice seemed to be saying something different. "Mommy, don't let Daddy leave. We need him to help us." Ruth woke up crying. She wanted to call David and beg him to come back, but she knew he had made his choice. He had chosen to live in the present instead of staying trapped in the past with her. Now Ruth was truly alone in her search for Penny. She had lost her husband and her old life, but she still had hope, and she still had love, and she still had the unshakable belief that her daughter was out there somewhere, waiting to be found. Ruth walked into Penny's room and sat on the bed. She picked up the recording toy and held it close to her heart. "It's just you and me now, baby girl," she whispered. "But that's okay. Mommy's still here. Mommy's still looking. And Mommy will never, ever stop." Outside, winter wind rattled the windows of the empty house. But inside, Ruth felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt like Penny was listening. She felt like somehow, somewhere, her daughter could hear every word. And for the first time since that terrible October morning, Ruth began to notice that things in Penny's room seemed to be moving by themselves. At first, Ruth thought she was imagining it. She would put Penny's favorite book on the nightstand, and the next day it would be on the desk. She would straighten the stuffed animals on the bed, and later find them arranged differently. Ruth told herself she was just forgetting where she had placed things. Grief could make people confused about details. But deep down, she knew she wasn't making mistakes. Someone or something was moving Penny's belongings. One morning in March 1994, Ruth found Penny's art supplies scattered across the floor. The crayons were arranged in a perfect circle, with the pink one in the center. Penny had always loved pink best. Ruth's hands shook as she cleaned up the crayons. "Is that you, baby girl?" she whispered to the empty room. "Are you trying to tell me something?" The room was silent, but Ruth felt a presence she couldn't explain. It was warm and gentle, like a hug from someone who loved her very much. Ruth started keeping a notebook where she wrote down every strange thing that happened. Books moving from shelf to shelf. Toys appearing in different positions. Windows opening on their own during cold nights. The strangest thing was the pink recording toy. Ruth had never touched it since the day Penny disappeared, but sometimes she found it in different spots around the room, on the windowsill, on the floor by the closet. Once, she discovered it sitting in the middle of Penny's pillow. Ruth was afraid to tell anyone about these events. Her sister Marion already thought she was spending too much time alone in the house. Her few remaining friends had stopped calling, because Ruth only wanted to talk about Penny. If she told people that objects were moving by themselves, they would think she had lost her mind completely. But Ruth knew what she was seeing. She started leaving little tests around Penny's room. She would place a pencil in an exact spot and take a picture of it. The next day, the pencil would be somewhere else. She put a coin on the dresser and marked its position with tape. By morning, the coin was gone. Ruth searched everywhere and finally found it inside one of Penny's old shoes. The most amazing thing happened on a Tuesday in April. Ruth came home from work at the library to find that someone had made Penny's bed. The covers were pulled up neatly, and the pillow was fluffed just the way Penny used to do it. Ruth had left the bed unmade that morning, like she always did. She wanted Penny's room to look lived in, not like a museum, but now it was perfect and tidy, as if a 7-year-old girl had just finished her morning chores. Ruth sat on the bed and started to cry. Not sad tears this time, but tears of wonder and hope. "You're here, aren't you?" she said out loud. "You're trying to show me you're okay." That night, Ruth had the most vivid dream yet. She saw Penny standing at the foot of her bed, looking exactly the same as the day she disappeared. Penny was wearing her pink pajamas and holding her recording toy. "Mommy, I'm trying to tell you where I am," Penny said in the dream. "But you have to listen. Better. Where are you, baby? Tell me how to find you. Look for the signs, Mommy. Follow the clues I'm leaving you." Ruth woke up with her heart pounding. She ran to Penny's room and turned on the light. Everything looked normal, but Ruth felt electricity in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm. She started paying closer attention to the pattern of moved objects. Maybe Penny was trying to spell out a message or point her in a certain direction. Ruth made charts and diagrams. She took photographs of everything. She measured distances and looked for connections. But if there was a message, she couldn't figure out what it meant. Dr. Stevens, Ruth's family doctor, was worried about her. During a routine checkup, he noticed how thin Ruth had become and how tired she looked. "Are you sleeping well?" he asked. "Sometimes," Ruth said, not wanting to mention the dreams. "Are you eating regular meals?" "I try to." Dr. Stevens wrote her a prescription for sleeping pills and vitamins. "Ruth, I know this has been an incredibly difficult time for you. Have you considered talking to a counselor?" "I don't need a counselor. I need to find my daughter." Sometimes talking to someone can help us think more clearly about difficult situations. Ruth took the prescription but never filled it. She didn't want sleeping pills. She wanted to stay awake in case Penny tried to contact her again. Her sister Marion came for a visit in June and was shocked by how Ruth looked. "You're wasting away," Marion said bluntly. "This isn't healthy. Penny wouldn't want you to destroy yourself." "I'm not destroying myself. I'm waiting for her to come home." Marion looked around the house and shook her head. "Ruth, it's been almost 3 years. You can't keep living like this. You need to pack up Penny's room and start over." "Never." "Then at least come stay with me for a while. Get away from this house and all these memories." "I can't leave." "What? If she comes back and I'm not here?" "Ruth, listen to yourself. You sound like you're talking to a ghost." Marion didn't know how close to the truth she was. Ruth was talking to a ghost, or at least something that felt like one, and that presence was the only thing keeping her going. After Marion left, Ruth sat in Penny's room and spoke directly to the air around her. "I know you're here, sweetheart. I can feel you. But I need you to help me understand what you're trying to tell me." That night, Ruth woke up to the sound of music. It was faint and far away, but it sounded like a child singing. Ruth followed the sound through the house, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. In the morning, Ruth found something that made her gasp. The pink recording toy was sitting on the kitchen table, even though she was certain she had left it in Penny's room. Next to it was a glass of water that Ruth didn't remember pouring. Ruth picked up the recording toy with trembling hands. Had Penny left her a new message? Was this the sign she had been waiting for? She pressed the play button and heard static. Then, very faintly, she heard something that made her heart stop. It was a whisper, so quiet she could barely make it out. But Ruth was sure she heard her daughter's voice saying 2 words that changed everything. "Help me!" Ruth played the message over and over, but each time it seemed fainter. By the 4th time, there was only static. But Ruth knew what she had heard. Penny was alive. Penny needed help. And somehow, impossibly, Penny was using her old recording toy to send messages across the space between them. Ruth didn't care if anyone thought she was crazy. She had proof now that her daughter was out there somewhere, trying to come home. And Ruth was going to find her, no matter what it took. Ruth played the recording over and over, trying to hear every detail. The voice was definitely Penny's, but it sounded different somehow. Older, more tired. Like Penny had been through something terrible but was still fighting to survive. "Help me," the whisper said again when Ruth pressed play. "Mommy, help me." Ruth's hands shook as she held the pink toy. This was really happening. After 4 years of wondering and searching and hoping, she finally had proof that Penny was alive. But where was she? And how was she able to record messages on a toy that had been sitting in their house all this time? Ruth called the police station and asked to speak with Officer Jenkins. He had been promoted to detective now, but he still remembered the Hartwell case. "Detective Jenkins, this is Ruth Hartwell. I need you to come to my house right away. I found new evidence about Penny. There was a pause on the phone. Mrs. Hartwell, what kind of evidence? A recording. Penny left me a new message on her toy. She's asking for help. Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Hartwell, I'll be right over. Detective Jenkins arrived 20 minutes later. He looked older and more tired than Ruth remembered. He had investigated many missing children cases over the years, and most of them didn't have happy endings. Show me what you found, he said gently. Ruth led him to the kitchen where the recording toy sat on the table. She pressed the play button and held her breath. Static filled the air. Then, nothing. I don't hear anything, Mrs. Hartwell. Ruth pressed play again. More static. No voice. No whisper. Nothing. It was here, Ruth said desperately. I heard it this morning. Penny was saying, "Help me," in a whisper. Detective Jenkins sat down across from Ruth and spoke carefully. Mrs. Hartwell, this toy is over, 4 years old. Old electronics can pick up radio signals or interference from other devices. Sometimes that can sound like voices. This wasn't interference, it was my daughter. I understand why you would want to believe that, but we need to be realistic here. Penny has been missing for 4 years. This toy has been sitting in your house the whole time. There's no way. She could have recorded a new message on it. Ruth felt anger rising in her chest. You think I'm making this up? I think you're a mother who misses her daughter very much. I think your mind might be playing tricks on you because you want so badly to hear from her. Get out, Ruth said quietly. Mrs. Hartwell, get out of my house. You don't believe me, so there's no point in talking. Detective Jenkins stood up slowly. If you find any real evidence, please call me. But Mrs. Hartwell, you might want to consider talking to someone about all this. There are counselors who specialize in helping families deal with long-term missing person cases. After he left, Ruth sat alone in her kitchen feeling more isolated than ever. Even the police thought she was losing her mind, but she knew what she had heard. Penny's voice had been real. That night, Ruth couldn't sleep. She kept checking the recording toy, hoping to hear the message again. She pressed play dozens of times, but there was only static. Around 3 in the morning, Ruth finally drifted, off to sleep on the couch. She dreamed about Penny again, but this time the dream was different. Penny looked older in the dream. Not 7 anymore, but maybe 11 or 12. She was thin and pale, and her clothes were dirty. She was sitting in a dark place that looked like a basement or cave. Mommy, can you hear me? Dream Penny asked. Yes, baby, I can hear you. Where are you? I don't know exactly, it's dark here. Cold, but I can sometimes make the toy work when I concentrate really hard. How are you doing that? I don't know. But when I think about you really, really hard, sometimes I can make my voice reach the toy. It only works for a few seconds. Tell me how to find you. I'm underground, Mommy, in tunnels. There are other kids here too, but they come and go. I've been here the longest. Ruth woke up with tears on her face. The dream had felt so real, so vivid. It wasn't like her other dreams that were fuzzy and hard to remember. This one was crystal clear. She ran to Penny's room and grabbed the recording toy. Penny, if you can hear me, please try again. Please send me another message. Ruth sat on Penny's bed and waited. Hours passed. The sun came up. Still nothing. But at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, Ruth heard a sound that made her heart leap. It was the tiny beep that the recording toy made when someone pressed the record button. Ruth looked down at the toy in her hands. The red recording light was blinking, even though no one was touching it. She waited, barely breathing, until the light went off. Then she pressed play. Mommy. Penny's voice was clearer this time, less static. The man, he said, underground. Can't get out. Ruth's hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped the toy. Penny, I'm here. Tell me more. But the message was over, just static now. Ruth played it again and again, trying to catch every word. The man, underground, can't get out. Someone had taken Penny and was keeping her underground. But where? And who was the man? Ruth knew she couldn't call the police again. They would never believe her. She was on her own. She went to the library where she worked and used the key. Computers to research everything she could about underground places in and around Millbrook. She found information about old mine shafts, storm drain systems, and basement storage areas. Ruth printed out maps and marked every possible underground location within 50 miles of their house. There were dozens of them. It would take months to search them all. But Ruth had time. She had nothing but time. That afternoon, Ruth drove to the first location on her list, an abandoned mine shaft outside of town. She brought a flashlight and called down into the darkness. Penny, are you? Down there, it's Mommy. No answer, just echoes. Ruth spent the rest of the day checking storm drains and old basement entrances. Nothing. But she wasn't discouraged. The recording had given her hope and direction. Penny was alive. Penny was underground somewhere. And Penny was somehow able to communicate through her old toy. Ruth didn't understand how it was possible, but she didn't need to understand it. She just needed to follow the clues her daughter was giving her. That night, Ruth fell asleep holding the recording toy. She woke up to the sound of the record button beeping again. This time the message was longer. Mommy, I love you. Still looking for me. The tunnels. Near the school. Hurry. Ruth sat up straight. Near the school? That narrowed down her search area considerably. She looked at her maps and circled all the underground locations within a mile of Penny's elementary school. There were old storm drains, a few basement storage rooms, and something called maintenance tunnels that connected several buildings. Ruth had a plan now. She would search every underground space near the school until she found her daughter. As she got dressed and prepared to start searching, Ruth heard one more message recording itself on the toy. Mommy, be careful. He's watching. Knows. You're looking. Ruth's blood went cold. Someone was watching her. The man who had taken Penny knew she was getting close. But Ruth wasn't going to let fear stop her. She had spent 4 years waiting and hoping. Now she had real clues, real communication from her daughter. Nothing was going to keep her from bringing Penny home. Ruth spent the next week listening to the recording over and over, trying to catch every word. Between the static and whispers, she started to hear things she had missed before. Mommy, help me. The man, he said, underground. Can't get out. Near the school. The tunnels connect. Other children. Other children. Ruth's heart broke, thinking about more families going through what she had experienced. But it also gave her hope. If there were other children, maybe someone else had noticed them missing. Maybe there were more clues. Ruth went to the library and searched through old newspapers for any missing children reports in nearby towns. She found 3 cases over the past 5 years, a boy named Tommy from the next town over, a girl named Sarah from 20 miles away, another boy named Jake who had disappeared just last year. All of them were around Penny's age when they vanished. All of them had disappeared from their bedrooms at night. All of them had never been found. Ruth made copies of all the newspaper articles and pinned them to a bulletin board in her kitchen. She drew lines connecting the locations where each child had disappeared. When she stepped back to look at the map, she saw a pattern. All the disappearances formed a rough circle around the old mining area outside Millbrook, the same area where Ruth had found that piece of pink fabric months ago. Ruth's hands shook as she realized what this meant. One person had taken all these children. The same man who had Penny was collecting kids from different towns and keeping them underground somewhere. That night, Ruth had another vivid dream. This time she saw Penny with other children in a dark underground room. They looked scared and thin, but they were taking care of each other like a little family. "We help each other, Mommy," Dream Penny explained. "The older kids share food with the younger ones. We tell stories to keep from being too scared." "How long have you all been there?" "Some kids come and go, but I've been here the longest. The man says I'm his favorite because I was the first one who didn't cry all the time." "What does this man look like?" "He's old and has gray hair. He talks nice, but his eyes are mean. He brings us food and says we're his special children now." Ruth woke up feeling sick to her stomach. She ran to the bathroom and threw up, thinking about what her daughter had been living through for 4 years. But the dream had given her more information. An older man with gray hair who talked nicely, but had mean eyes. Ruth started thinking about all the older men she knew in Millbrook. There was Mr. Peterson who ran the hardware store, but he was married with grandchildren and didn't seem like the type. There was old Joe who lived alone behind the gas station, but Joe was too frail to kidnap children. Then Ruth remembered something that made her blood turn cold. Mr. Henderson, their next-door neighbor, had gray hair. He had always been so helpful during the search for Penny. He had access to their yard and their trust. Ruth thought back to the night Penny disappeared. Mr. Henderson had been one of the first people to offer help. He had searched their backyard with a flashlight, saying he wanted to look for clues. What if he hadn't been looking for clues? What if he had been making sure he didn't leave any evidence behind? Ruth remembered more details that hadn't seemed important at the time. Mr. Henderson had worked in the mines when he was younger. He would know about all the underground tunnels and hiding places. He lived alone, so no one would question strange sounds or activities at his house. And he had been watching Ruth all these years, living right next door while she searched desperately for her daughter. Ruth felt angry and scared at the same time. If Mr. Henderson was the kidnapper, he had been playing a cruel game with her family for years, pretending to care while he held Penny prisoner somewhere underground. But Ruth needed proof before she could do anything. She couldn't just accuse her neighbor based on dreams and suspicions. Ruth started watching Mr. Henderson's house more carefully. She noticed that he left every evening around 7 o'clock, carrying a bag and returning late at night. He always parked his truck in the back, where neighbors couldn't see it clearly. Where was he going with that bag? What was he doing out there in the dark? One evening, Ruth decided to follow him. She waited in her car until she saw Mr. Henderson's truck pull out of his driveway. Then she followed at a distance, keeping her headlights off so he wouldn't notice her. Mr. Henderson drove to the edge of town and turned down a dirt road that led to the old mining area. Ruth had to stop her car and continue on foot so he wouldn't hear her engine. She watched from behind some trees as Mr. Henderson parked near what looked like an old storm drain entrance. He took his bag and a flashlight and disappeared into a concrete tunnel. Ruth's heart pounded as she crept closer to investigate. The storm drain was bigger than she had expected, with a metal grate that had been cut open. Fresh footprints in the mud showed that someone used this entrance regularly. Ruth waited until she was sure Mr. Henderson was far enough into the tunnel system, then she followed. The tunnel was dark and smelled like dampness and decay. She used her small flashlight to see where she was going. The tunnel led deeper underground and connected to other passages. Ruth could see that this was a whole network of underground spaces that someone could use to move around without being seen above ground. After walking for what felt like hours, Ruth heard voices ahead. She turned off her flashlight and crept forward in the darkness. Through a crack in a concrete wall, Ruth could see light coming from what looked like a hidden room. She pressed her ear to the crack and heard Mr. Henderson talking to someone. "You need to eat your dinner," he was saying in a gentle voice. "Growing children need proper nutrition." Then Ruth heard a voice that made her knees go weak. It was older than she remembered, but it was definitely Penny. "We're not hungry," Penny said. "Please just let us go home to our families." "This is your home now," Mr. Henderson replied. "I take much better care of you than those other people ever did. They didn't appreciate how special you are." Ruth wanted to burst through the wall and grab her daughter, but she knew Mr. Henderson might hurt the children if he felt trapped. She needed to be smart about this. She crept back through the tunnels and ran to her car. She had found them. After 4 years of searching, she had finally found where Mr. Henderson was keeping Penny and the other missing children. But as Ruth drove home to call for help, she realized something that made her hands shake on the steering wheel. Mr. Henderson's truck wasn't parked where she had left it. The dirt road was empty. He had seen her car. He knew someone had followed him. Ruth pressed harder on the gas pedal, racing to get home and call the police before Mr. Henderson could move the children to a different location. But when she pulled into her driveway, Ruth's blood turned to ice. Mr. Henderson was standing in her backyard with a flashlight, looking at the ground like he was searching for something, or maybe making sure something stayed hidden forever. Ruth sat in her car, afraid to get out. Mr. Henderson was still in her backyard, moving slowly with his flashlight. He seemed to be looking for something specific, checking the ground near the fence where Penny's window faced. Ruth's mind raced. She needed to call the police, but she also needed to be careful. If Mr. Henderson knew she had discovered his secret, he might hurt the children or move them somewhere else. She watched as Mr. Henderson knelt down near a large oak tree in her yard. He started digging with a small shovel he had brought with him. What was he burying, or what was he digging up? Ruth quietly got out of her car and crept around to the side of her house where she could see better. Mr. Henderson was pulling something out of the ground. It looked like a metal box, the kind people used to bury important papers or money. Mr. Henderson opened the box and took out what looked like photographs. Even from a distance, Ruth could see his face in the flashlight glow. His expression was cold and calculating, nothing like the kind neighbor she had known for years. Ruth realized she was looking at the real Mr. Henderson for the first time, the man who had pretended to care about finding Penny while he held her. Prisoner underground. Mr. Henderson put the photographs back in the box and buried it again. Then he stood up and looked directly at Ruth's house. Ruth ducked behind a bush, hoping he hadn't seen her. She heard his footsteps walking toward the front of her house. Ruth's heart pounded as she wondered what he was planning to do. Was he going to break in? Was he going to hurt her to keep his secret safe? Ruth crawled to her back door and slipped inside as quietly as possible. She grabbed the phone and started dialing 911, but then she heard a knock at her front door. "Ruth?" Mr. Henderson called out in his normal, friendly voice. "I saw your car pull up. Is everything okay? You look upset." Ruth's hands shook as she held the phone. Should she answer the door and pretend everything was normal? Or should she ignore him and hope he went away? "Ruth, I know you're in there," Mr. Henderson said, and his voice sounded different now, less friendly, more threatening. "We need to talk." Ruth finished dialing 911 and whispered into the phone. "I need help. My neighbor is the man who kidnapped my daughter. He's at my door right now." "Ma'am, can you speak louder? I can barely hear you." "I can't speak louder," Ruth whispered desperately. "He'll hear me. His name is Henderson. He lives next door. He has children hidden in underground tunnels near the old mining area." "Ma'am, this sounds like the same call we've received from you before about hearing voices. Are you having another episode?" Ruth wanted to scream. Even now, when she had real proof, the police didn't believe her. The knocking at her door got louder. "Ruth, open this door. I know you followed me tonight. I know you saw where I keep my special children." Ruth hung up on the 911 operator and ran to Penny's room. She grabbed the recording toy and pressed the record button. "Penny, if you can hear me, I found you. I know where you are. Mr. Henderson is here at the house, but I'm going to get help. Hold on, baby girl. Mommy is coming. Ruth heard the sound of her front door opening. Mr. Henderson had a key. Of course he did. He had been watching her house for years, probably making copies of her keys when she wasn't paying attention. Ruth, where are you? Mr. Henderson called out as his footsteps moved through her house. We really do need to have a conversation. Ruth climbed out of Penny's bedroom window, the same window her daughter had disappeared through 4 years ago. She ran across her yard and toward the street, hoping to reach a neighbor's house before Mr. Henderson caught her. But Mr. Henderson was faster than she expected for an older man. He caught up with her at the edge of her property and grabbed her arm. You shouldn't have followed me tonight, he said quietly. You've made things very complicated. Ruth looked into his eyes and saw the meanness that Penny had described in her dreams. Mr. Henderson wasn't the kind neighbor anymore. He was showing his true face now. Where is my daughter? Ruth demanded, trying to pull away from his grip. She's safe. They're all safe as long as people don't interfere with my work. Your work? You call kidnapping children work? Mr. Henderson's grip tightened on her arm. I call it rescuing. Those children were being wasted by families who didn't appreciate them. I give them structure, purpose, love. You give them prison cells. I give them a place where they matter, where they're special. Your Penny has learned to be grateful for what I provide. Ruth felt sick hearing him talk about Penny like she belonged to him. She doesn't belong to you. She belongs with her family. You had your chance with her for 7 years. Now it's my turn. Mr. Henderson started pulling Ruth toward his truck. She realized he was planning to take her to the underground tunnels too, maybe to keep her quiet permanently. Ruth fought against his grip, but he was surprisingly strong, just as she thought she couldn't. Break free, she heard the sound of car doors slamming. 2 police cars had pulled up in front of her house. The 911 operator had sent officers after all, probably to check on Ruth's mental state rather than to arrest a kidnapper. Help! Ruth screamed. This is the man who took my daughter. He has children hidden in tunnels. Mr. Henderson let go of Ruth and tried to run, but the police officers were already surrounding him. Sir, we need you to stop right there, one officer called out. Mr. Henderson raised his hands but kept walking backward toward his truck. Officers, this woman has been having mental health issues for years. She's been harassing me with wild accusations. That's not true, Ruth shouted. I can prove it. I followed him tonight to underground tunnels where he's keeping missing children. The police officers looked confused. They had come expecting to deal with a woman having a breakdown, not a kidnapping case. Mr. Henderson took advantage of their confusion and made a run for his truck. But as he was climbing into the driver's seat, something amazing happened. Ruth heard a familiar beeping sound coming from her house. The recording toy was activating by itself, just like it had been doing for months. But this time, the message was loud enough for everyone to hear. Penny's voice came drifting out of the open bedroom window, clear and strong. Help us! We're in the tunnels under the old storm drain. There are 5 of us here. Please don't let him get away. The police officers stared at Ruth's house in shock. Mr. Henderson's face went white as he realized his secret was finally out in the open. One of the officers grabbed Mr. Henderson before he could start his truck. The other officer ran toward Ruth. Ma'am, where exactly are these tunnels? We need to get search teams out there immediately. Ruth smiled through her tears as she gave them directions to the storm drain entrance. After 4 years of being told, she was crazy. People were finally listening to her. And somewhere underground, Penny was still using her amazing gift to call for help, just like she had been doing all along. Ruth led the police officers through the dark tunnels, her flashlight cutting through the blackness ahead. Behind her, she could hear Detective Jenkins and 3 other officers following carefully. They had left Mr. Henderson handcuffed in a police car, but Ruth knew the most important work was just beginning. "The entrance is just ahead," Ruth whispered, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. After 4 years, she was finally going to see Penny again. As they got closer to the hidden room, Ruth could hear voices. Children's voices talking quietly to each other. Ruth's eyes filled with tears, knowing that one of those voices belonged to her daughter. "We need to be very careful," Detective Jenkins said softly. "These children have been through terrible trauma. We don't want to scare them more." Ruth nodded, but every part of her wanted to run ahead and grab Penny in her arms. She had waited so long for this moment. They reached the crack in the wall where Ruth had listened earlier. Detective Jenkins shined his flashlight through the opening and gasped at what he saw. There were 5 children sitting in a small underground room. They were thin and pale, but they were alive. They had made the space as comfortable as they could with blankets and pillows that Mr. Henderson had given them. The oldest child looked to be about 12. She had her arm around a younger boy who couldn't have been more than 8, and there, sitting against the far wall, was Penny. Ruth's heart nearly exploded with joy and sadness at the same time. Penny was alive, but she looked so different. She was taller now, almost like a teenager instead of the 7-year-old who had disappeared. Her hair was longer and her face was thinner, but her eyes were still the same bright brown that Ruth remembered. "Penny," Ruth whispered through the crack. All the children looked up in surprise. Penny's eyes went wide when she saw the flashlight beam. "Mommy." Penny's voice was uncertain, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Yes, baby, it's Mommy. We're here to take you home." Penny started crying and ran toward the wall. "Mommy, you found us! I knew you would! I kept sending you messages!" "I heard them, sweetheart. Every single one. You were so brave." The other officers were working to break down the wall that separated them from the children. It was made of wood and concrete, but it wasn't too thick. Mr. Henderson had built it to keep children in, not to keep rescuers out. "Are you all okay in there?" Detective Jenkins called to the children. "We're police officers. We're here to help you," the oldest girl answered. "We're okay, scared but okay. The man said no one would ever find us here." "Well, he was wrong," Detective Jenkins said firmly, "and he's never going to hurt any of you again." It took 20 minutes to break through the wall. When the opening was finally big enough, Ruth was the first person through. Penny ran into her mother's arms, and Ruth held her so tight she never wanted to let go. Penny felt different, bigger and stronger, but she still smelled like Ruth's little girl. "Mommy, I missed you so much," Penny sobbed into Ruth's shoulder. "I missed you too, baby. I never stopped looking for you, not for one single day." Ruth looked around the underground room and felt sick at what she saw. There were sleeping bags on the floor and a few buckets for water. One corner had books and toys that Mr. Henderson had brought for the children. But it was still a prison, no matter how he had tried to make it comfortable. "How long have you all been here?" Ruth asked the children gently. The oldest girl answered, "I'm Sarah. I've been here for 2 years. Tommy has been here for 3 years. Jake came last year. And little Amy has been here for 6 months." Ruth's heart broke thinking about all these families who had been searching for their children, just like she had been searching for Penny. "Penny's been here the longest," Sarah continued. "She's like our big sister. She takes care of all of us and tells us stories so we don't get too scared." Ruth looked at her daughter with amazement. Penny had been only 7 when she was taken, but she had become a leader and protector for the other children. "You've been so brave, sweetheart," Ruth told Penny. "I'm so proud of you." The police officers were helping the other children out of the underground room. Each child was wrapped in blankets and given water to drink. They all looked scared but hopeful now that they were being rescued. "How did you communicate with the toy?" Detective Jenkins asked Penny as they walked through the tunnels toward the exit. Penny looked confused. What toy? Ruth showed her the pink recording device. This one. You've been sending me messages on it for months. That's how I knew you were alive and how I found you. Penny stared at the toy with wide eyes. But Mummy, I don't know how to use that from here. I haven't seen it since the night I was taken. Ruth felt a chill run down her spine. If Penny hadn't been recording the messages, then how had they appeared on the toy? I did wish really hard that I could talk to you, Penny said thoughtfully. Every night I would think about you and hope somehow you could hear me saying I was okay. Detective Jenkins and Ruth looked at each other with confusion. There was no scientific explanation for how the recording toy had worked, but somehow, Penny's desperate love for her mother had found a way to reach across the darkness. When they finally emerged from the tunnels into the cool night air, Ruth felt like she could breathe again. Ambulances were waiting to check on the children and make sure they were healthy. Ruth stayed close to Penny as the paramedics examined her. Penny was thin and needed better nutrition, but she was basically healthy. More importantly, she was strong and brave, and still the amazing little girl Ruth remembered. What happens now? Penny asked as they sat in the back of an ambulance. Now, you come home with me, Ruth said, squeezing her daughter's hand, and we start our life together again. Will I have to go back to school? Will kids think I'm weird because of what happened? Ruth smiled. You'll go back to school when you're ready. And anyone who thinks you're weird doesn't understand how incredible you are. As the ambulance drove them toward the hospital for a final checkup, Ruth watched the sun starting to rise over Millbrook. It was the first sunrise in 4 years that filled her with hope, instead of sadness. Penny fell asleep against Ruth's shoulder, finally safe after so many years of fear. And Ruth made a silent promise that she would spend the rest of her life making sure Penny felt loved and protected. The nightmare was finally over. The search had ended, and the healing could begin. But as Ruth sat in the hospital waiting room while doctors checked on Penny, she realized that finding her daughter was just the beginning. Now came the hard part, helping Penny adjust to a world that had changed while she was gone. Detective Jenkins sat down next to Ruth with a cup of coffee. The other children are all doing well. Their families are on their way here. Sarah's parents are driving down from 2 towns over. They never stopped hoping. Just like you. Ruth felt happy and sad at the same time. Happy that other families would be reunited, but sad that they had all suffered for so long. What about Mr. Henderson? Ruth asked. He's been arrested and charged with kidnapping. Based on what we found in his house and those tunnels, he'll be going to prison for the rest of his life. Ruth nodded. She didn't want to think about Mr. Henderson anymore. She just wanted to focus on Penny and their future together. Dr. Martinez came out of the examination room where Penny was being checked. Mrs. Hartwell, your daughter is remarkably healthy considering what she's been through. She's undernourished and will need to gain some weight, but physically she's going to be fine. What about emotionally? Ruth asked. That was what worried her most. Children are very resilient. Penny seems to have coped by taking care of the younger children. That probably helped her feel strong and useful instead of just scared. But she'll need time to adjust to being home. And you might want to consider counseling for both of you. Ruth was willing to do whatever it took to help Penny heal. When Penny came out of the examination room, she looked overwhelmed by all the bright lights and busy hospital sounds. Underground, everything had been quiet and dim. The normal world seemed too loud and too bright after 4 years. Can we go home now, Mommy? Penny asked, holding Ruth's hand tightly. Yes, baby. Let's go home. The drive back to their house on Maple Street felt like a dream. Ruth kept looking in the rearview mirror to make sure Penny was really there in the back seat. After 4 years of that seat being empty, it felt magical to see her daughter sitting there again. But when they pulled into their driveway, Penny got very quiet. "Is that Mr. Henderson's house?" she asked, pointing to the house next door. "Yes, but he's never coming back. He's in jail now where he can't hurt anyone." Penny stared at the house with a scared expression. "He used to watch our house from his windows. Sometimes late at night I could see him looking over here with binoculars." Ruth felt sick thinking about Mr. Henderson spying on them all those years, but she tried to keep her voice calm for Penny's sake. "He can't watch us anymore. We're safe now." Walking into their house was strange for both of them. Everything looked exactly the same as the night Penny disappeared, but they were both different people now. Penny was 11 years old instead of 7. She was taller and more serious, with eyes that had seen too much sadness. Ruth was thinner and older looking, with gray streaks in her hair from 4 years of worry. "My room looks exactly the same," Penny said with wonder as they stood in her doorway. "I didn't want to change anything. I wanted it to be ready for you when you came home." Penny walked around her room, touching her old toys and books like she was visiting a museum of her childhood. "I thought about this room every day when I was underground. I used to imagine myself back here, safe in my bed." Ruth watched her daughter and felt tears in her eyes. Penny had grown up so much during those 4 years. She wasn't a little girl anymore. "Will you sleep in here tonight?" Ruth asked. "Or would you rather sleep in my room until you feel more comfortable?" "I think I'd like to sleep with you for a while," Penny said quietly. "I'm not used to being alone anymore." That night, Ruth and Penny lay together in Ruth's bed and talked about everything that had happened. Penny told her mother about life underground, how the children had created games to pass time, how they shared food and took care of each other, how they made up stories about their families to help them remember. "I told them all about you, Mommy. I said you were the most beautiful and smartest mommy in the world, and that you would never stop looking for me." "I never did stop looking," Ruth said, stroking Penny's hair. "Even when other people thought I should give up, I knew you were out there somewhere." "I could feel you looking for me," Penny said. "Sometimes when I was really scared, I would close my eyes and imagine you were right there with me. It made me feel braver." Ruth realized that the supernatural connection between them had been real, even if they couldn't explain how it worked. Their love had been stronger than the distance and darkness that separated them. The next few days were full of visitors. Penny's old teacher came by to see her. Neighbors who had searched for her stopped by to welcome her home. The other families of rescued children called to thank Ruth for never giving up. But Ruth could see that all the attention was overwhelming for Penny. She was used to quiet underground spaces with just a few other children. The normal world felt too big and too loud. "I know it's a lot," Ruth told her daughter one evening. "We can take things as slowly as you need." "Will I have to go back to school right away?" Penny asked. "Not until you're ready. We can get you a tutor to help you catch up on what you missed. And when you do go back to school, we'll make sure the teachers understand what you've been through." Penny nodded, but Ruth could see she was worried about fitting in with other kids her age. The hardest part came a week after the rescue, when David came to visit. Penny remembered her father, but she was shy around him. He had left during her absence, and she didn't understand why. "Where were you when I was gone?" Penny asked him directly. David's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared and sad, and I made a mistake. I thought maybe if I went away the pain would hurt less, but it didn't. I missed you every day, and I missed your mother too." "Are you going to leave again?" "Never. If you and your mother will let me, I want to be part of this family again." Ruth looked at her ex-husband and saw how much he had changed too. Losing Penny and then Losing his marriage had taught him what really mattered in life. "We can try," Ruth said carefully. "But things are different now. We all need time to figure out how to be a family again." That night, as Penny slept peacefully beside her, Ruth heard a familiar sound. The pink recording toy was activating by itself one more time. Ruth picked it up and pressed play, wondering what message she would hear now that Penny was safely home. But this time, the message was different. Instead of Penny's voice calling for help, Ruth heard something that made her heart swell with joy. It was Penny's voice, but older and stronger, saying, "Thank you, Mommy. Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for bringing me home." Ruth looked at her sleeping daughter and smiled. The toy had served its purpose. It had carried love across impossible distances and brought them back together. Now it was time to build a new life, one day at a time, with all the love they had, saved up during their years apart. 3 months had passed since the rescue, and Ruth watched Penny playing in their backyard, with a mixture of joy and sadness. Her daughter was laughing as she chased butterflies among the flowers, but Ruth could see how carefully Penny stayed close to the house. Underground, Penny had learned to be cautious about everything. Dr. Sarah Coleman, the counselor they had been seeing, said this was normal. Children who have been imprisoned often feel unsafe in open spaces at first, she had explained. Penny's healing will take time, but she's making wonderful progress. Ruth was proud of how brave Penny had been during their counseling sessions. Her daughter talked about her fears honestly, but also shared the ways she had helped the other children stay strong. Penny was a survivor, not just a victim. David had been coming over for dinner twice a week, slowly rebuilding his relationship with both Ruth and Penny. He was patient and gentle, understanding that trust had to be earned back one day at a time. "I brought something for you," David said to Penny one evening, pulling a small wrapped box from his jacket pocket. Penny opened it carefully and found a new recording device, much more modern than her old pink toy. This one was digital and could hold hundreds of messages. "I thought maybe you'd like to start recording new memories," David said. "Happy ones this time." Penny looked at the new device thoughtfully. "What about my old toy?" Ruth had been wondering the same thing. The pink recording toy had been quiet for weeks now, sitting on Penny's nightstand like any normal device. Whatever magic had connected them seemed to have ended when they were reunited. "Your old toy did its job," Ruth said. "It helped us find each other. Maybe now it can rest." That night, Penny recorded her first message on the new device. Ruth listened from the hallway as her daughter's voice filled the room. "Hi, this is Penny. I'm 11 years old now, and I'm home with my mommy and daddy. Today was a good day. I helped Mommy plant flowers in the garden, and we saw 3 butterflies. Tomorrow I'm going to try going to the library with Mommy. I'm a little scared because there will be lots of people there, but I want to be brave." Ruth smiled, hearing the hope in Penny's voice. Her daughter was learning to look forward instead of backward. The next morning brought unexpected news. Detective Jenkins called to tell them that Mr. Henderson wanted to speak with Penny. He was in prison awaiting trial, but his lawyer said he had something important to tell her. "Absolutely not," Ruth said immediately. "Penny never has to see that man again." "I understand your feelings, Mrs. Hartwell, but he claims he has information about how Penny was able to communicate through the recording toy. He says it might help other missing children." Ruth felt torn. She didn't want to put Penny through the trauma of seeing Mr. Henderson again. But if there was a chance it could help other families, maybe they should consider it. She discussed it with Penny, who surprised her with her answer. "I want to talk to him, Mommy. Not because I'm not scared, but because I want him to know that he didn't break me. I want him to see that I'm okay and that love is stronger than what he did to us." Ruth was amazed by her daughter's courage and wisdom. Penny had grown into someone who wanted to help others, even after everything she had been through. They arranged for the meeting to take place at the prison, with Dr. Coleman present and strict time limits. Ruth would be there too, ready to end the conversation if Penny felt uncomfortable. Mr. Henderson looked much older and smaller in his orange prison uniform. The mean look in. His eyes had been replaced by something that might have been regret, though Ruth found it hard to trust anything about him. "Hello, Penny," he said quietly, when they sat down across from him at a metal table. Penny looked directly at him without flinching. "Hello, Mr. Henderson. I wanted to tell you something about the toy, something I never told anyone else." Ruth tensed, ready to protect Penny from whatever cruel thing he might say. "That toy was special," Mr. Henderson continued. "It belonged to my own daughter many years ago. She died in an accident when she was 7, the same age you were when I took you." Ruth saw a flash of pain cross his face, and for a moment he looked human instead of monstrous. "I convinced myself that I was saving children like my daughter. I thought if I kept you safe underground, nothing bad could ever happen to you. But I was wrong. I was the bad thing that happened to you." Penny listened without speaking, her face calm and serious. "The toy worked because of love," Mr. Henderson said. "My daughter loved it, you loved it, and your mother loved you. That much love in one small object created something I can't explain, something that connected hearts across impossible distances." He looked directly at Penny. "I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry for taking you away from your family. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know that even someone like me could see how much love there was between you and your mother." Penny was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised everyone in the room. "I forgive you, Mr. Henderson, not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to anger would hurt me more than it would hurt you. I want to be free from all of this." Ruth felt tears streaming down her face as she watched her 11-year-old daughter show more wisdom and strength than most adults ever would. Mr. Henderson put his head in his hands and cried. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're a better person than I ever was." As they left the prison, Ruth put her arm around Penny. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. That was incredibly brave." "It felt good to say goodbye to that part of my life," Penny said. "Now I can focus on the good things that are coming." That night, Penny made one final recording on her old pink toy. Ruth found her sitting on her bed, speaking into the small device one last time. "Thank you for helping me and Mommy find each other," Penny said. "You did something magical, and I'll never forget it. But now I'm ready to make new recordings about new adventures. I love you, little pink toy. Sweet dreams." Penny placed the toy gently in a memory box with other treasures from her childhood. Then she picked up her new recording device and began planning all the happy memories she wanted to capture. Ruth watched from the doorway and felt her heart overflow with love and gratitude. They had all been through so much darkness, but they had found their way back to the light. The pink recording toy had served its purpose. It had carried love across the void and brought them home to each other. Now, it could rest, surrounded by other childhood treasures, while Penny created new memories filled with hope and joy. The magic was real, but it had always been the magic of love. And that magic would continue to protect them, even without a special toy to carry it. 6 months after the rescue, Ruth woke up to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. She found Penny and David making pancakes together, flour covering, both of them from head to toe. "We're making butterfly pancakes," Penny announced, holding up a pancake that looked more like a blob than a butterfly. "Daddy's not very good at making shapes, but they still taste good." Ruth smiled, watching her family together. David had officially moved back in last month, but they were taking things slowly. They were all different people now than they had been 5 years ago. The other kids are coming to visit today, Penny reminded Ruth. Sarah's mom is driving her down, and Tommy's family is bringing him too. Ruth nodded. The 5 children who had been rescued together had stayed in touch, forming a special bond that no one else could understand. They called themselves the Underground Family and got together once a month. At first, Ruth had worried that these visits might bring back bad memories for Penny, but Dr. Coleman had explained that maintaining connections with the other children was actually helping all of them heal. They understand each other in a way that no one else can, the counselor had said. They survived something terrible together, but they also learned to take care of each other. That's something beautiful to hold on to. Sarah arrived first with her parents. She was 14 now and had grown tall and confident. She hugged Penny tightly and immediately started talking about her new school and the art class she was taking. "I've been drawing pictures of all of us," Sarah told Penny. "Happy pictures. Of us doing normal things, not sad pictures about what happened." Tommy came next with his mom and dad. He was 13 and had gotten interested in computers since being rescued. "I'm learning how to make websites," he told everyone proudly. "I want to make one that helps families find missing kids." When Jake arrived with his family, he seemed quieter than the others. He was 12, but still had nightmares sometimes, according to his parents. Little Amy, who was now 8, bounced into the house like nothing bad had ever happened to her. "Penny, I lost a tooth. Look!" She showed everyone the gap in her smile. Ruth watched all 5 children together and marveled at how resilient they were. They had all been through the same terrible experience, but each was healing in their own way. The children spent the afternoon playing in the backyard while the parents talked in the kitchen. Ruth had become close friends with the other families. They understood each other's journey in a way that no one else could. "How is Penny doing with school?" asked Sarah's mom, Mrs. Peterson. "She's catching up quickly," Ruth replied. "The teachers have been wonderful about giving her extra help. She's actually ahead in reading because she spent so much time with books underground." "Tommy's doing well too," said his father, "but he still doesn't like being in small spaces. We had to move his bedroom to the biggest room in our house." All the parents nodded. They had all learned to watch for signs that their children were struggling and to be patient with the healing process. That evening, after the other families had gone home, Penny sat on her bed with her new recording device. Ruth listened from the hallway as her daughter spoke. "Hi, it's me again. Today was really good. All my underground friends came to visit, and we played games and told jokes. Sarah is teaching me how to draw better pictures. Tommy showed me how to use a computer. Jake is still quiet sometimes, but he smiled more today. And Amy is just Amy, happy and silly and perfect." Penny paused, then continued. "I've been thinking about something Mr. Henderson said. He said the old toy worked because of love. I think he was right. When I was scared underground, I would think about Mommy and how much she loved me. And somehow that love found a way to reach her." Ruth wiped tears from her eyes as she listened. "I don't need the magic toy anymore because I'm not lost anymore. But I'll never forget how it felt to know that love could travel through walls and tunnels and darkness. That's something I want to remember forever." The next morning brought exciting news. Detective Jenkins called to tell them that Mr. Henderson's trial was over. He had been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. "It's finally finished," Detective Jenkins told Ruth. "He can never hurt another child." Ruth felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had been dreading the trial, worried about Penny having to testify, but Mr. Henderson had pleaded guilty to all charges, sparing the children from having to relive their trauma in court. "There's something else," Detective Jenkins continued. "The prosecutor wants to give Penny a special award for her bravery in helping the other children survive. It's called the Courage Under Fire Award." Penny was excited about the award ceremony, which was held at the courthouse the following week. All 5 children received the same award, recognizing their strength and the way they had taken care of each other. Ruth watched proudly as Penny walked across the stage to receive her certificate. Her daughter stood tall and confident, speaking clearly into the microphone when asked to say a few words. "We survived because we helped each other," Penny said. "We shared food and told stories and made sure nobody felt alone. I learned that even in the darkest places, love can still find a way to shine." The audience applauded, and Ruth saw that many people had tears in their eyes. After the ceremony, a reporter asked to interview Penny for the local newspaper. Ruth was nervous about publicity, but Penny wanted to do it. "I want other kids to know that if something bad happens to them, they shouldn't give up hope," Penny told the reporter. "And I want parents to know that love is stronger than distance, or walls, or anything else. My mom never stopped looking for me, and that love helped me stay strong." The newspaper article came out the following week with the headline, "Local Girls' Courage Inspires Community." The story included photos of all 5 children and talked about how they had supported each other during their captivity. Ruth framed the article and hung it in the hallway next to school pictures and family photos. It was part of their story, now, but not the only part. That night, as Ruth tucked Penny into bed in her own room, Penny had finally felt ready to sleep alone again. Her daughter had something important to tell her. "Mommy, I need to tell you something about the other children." "What is it, sweetheart?" "I wasn't completely honest before. I do remember doing something with the old recording toy." Ruth sat down on the bed, surprised. "What do you mean?" "When I was really scared, I would hold my hands like I was holding the toy and whisper messages to you. I pretended I could send them through the air to reach you somehow. I didn't think it was really working, but it made me feel better to try." Ruth's eyes filled with tears as she understood. Penny's love had been so strong that it had found a way to bridge the impossible distance between them. "Your messages did reach me, baby girl. Every single one. I know that now, and I want you to know that you don't have to worry about me anymore. I'm not the scared little girl who got taken away. I'm stronger now. We're all stronger." Ruth hugged her daughter tight, marveling at the wisdom and courage that had grown from such a terrible experience. The pink recording toy sat quietly in its memory box, no longer needed, but never forgotten. It had done something miraculous. It had carried love across darkness and brought a family back together. But the real magic had always been in the hearts of the people who refused to give up on each other. And that magic would last forever. 1 year after the rescue, Ruth stood in her kitchen making breakfast and listening to the sounds of a normal family morning. Penny was upstairs getting ready for school, singing a song she had learned in her music class. David was in the shower, getting ready for work at his new job as a counselor for missing children's families. Ruth smiled as she flipped pancakes, thinking about how much their lives had changed. Not just since the rescue, but since that terrible night 9 years ago when everything had seemed to end. "Mommy, I can't find my science project," Penny called from upstairs. "Check your desk drawer," Ruth called back. These were the kinds of problems Ruth had dreamed about during those long years of searching. Normal problems, wonderful problems. Penny came running into the kitchen with her poster about butterflies, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders. She was 12 now, tall and confident, with bright eyes that sparkled with curiosity instead of fear. "I'm giving my presentation today," Penny announced, grabbing a piece of toast. "I chose butterflies because they remind me that beautiful things can come from dark places." Ruth's heart swelled with pride. Penny had grown into someone who could take her painful experiences and turn them into wisdom that helped others. "Are you nervous?" Ruth asked. "A little, but the good kind of nervous. Like when you're excited about something but also want to do your best." David came into the kitchen, straightening his tie. He kissed Ruth's cheek and ruffled Penny's hair. "Ready for the big presentation?" he asked. "Ready," Penny said with confidence. Ruth watched her family and felt grateful for every ordinary moment. She had learned never to take anything for granted again. After Penny and David left for school and work, Ruth went to her job at the children's library. She had switched from the regular library to one that specialized in helping kids who had been through difficult experiences. It felt good to use her story to help other families. During her lunch break, Ruth received a phone call that made her smile. It was Sarah's mother. "Ruth, I have wonderful news. Sarah got accepted to art school. She wants to become a therapist who uses art to help children heal from trauma." "That's amazing," Ruth said, feeling proud of the girl who had been like a big sister to Penny Underground. All 5 of the rescued children were thriving in their own ways. Tommy had created a website that helped families of missing children connect with each other. Jake had become an advocate for children's safety, speaking at schools about trusting their instincts. Little Amy, now 9, was a straight-A student who wanted to become a police officer when she grew up. Each child had found a way to turn their experience into something that could help others. They had learned that surviving something terrible could make you stronger, not just broken. That evening, the Hartwell family had a special tradition. Every month on the anniversary of Penny's rescue, they had a gratitude dinner where they shared things they were thankful for. "I'm grateful for my friends at school," Penny said, taking a bite of her favorite spaghetti and meatballs. "Especially Katie, who doesn't treat me different because of what happened to me." "I'm grateful for second chances," David said, looking at both Ruth and Penny. "I'm grateful that love is stronger than mistakes." Ruth thought about what she was most grateful for. There were so many things: Penny's safety, their rebuilt family, the other children who had been saved. But most of all, she was grateful for something else. "I'm grateful that I never stopped believing," Ruth said. "Even when everyone thought I was crazy, even when the police didn't believe me, even when it seemed impossible. I'm grateful that my heart knew you were out there, Penny." After dinner, they went to Penny's room where the memory box sat on a shelf. Inside were treasures from Penny's childhood: the pink recording toy, some drawings she had made as a little girl, a photograph of the Underground family on the day they were rescued. Penny opened the box and took out the pink recording toy. She held it carefully, like the precious thing it was. "Sometimes, I wonder if other families are out there right now, looking for their missing children," Penny said thoughtfully. "I'm sure there are," Ruth replied. "Do you think this toy could help them too?" Ruth considered the question. "I think love always finds a way to help, whether it's through a special toy or through people who care enough to keep searching." Penny nodded and placed the toy back in the box. "Maybe someday I'll help families like ours. Maybe I'll become someone who helps lost children find their way home." "I think you'd be wonderful at that," Ruth said. That night, Penny made her last recording on her new digital device about their first year together again. "Hi, it's Penny. Today marks exactly 1 year since I came home to my family. It's been the best year of my life, even though it was also hard sometimes. I had to learn how to be a regular kid again, and Mommy and Daddy had to learn how to be a family again." Penny paused, thinking about what else she wanted to say. "I want other kids who might be missing to know that people are looking for them. Someone out there loves them enough to never give up. And I want parents who are searching to know that love really is stronger than anything else in the world." Ruth listened from the hallway, just like she used to do when Penny was 7 years old. But now, instead of fear and worry, Ruth felt peace and hope. "I learned that even in the darkest places, light can find a way in. Even when you feel completely alone, love is still connecting you to the people who care about you. And even when everything seems impossible, miracles can still happen." Penny clicked off the recording device and got ready for bed. Ruth came, and to say goodnight, just like she had done every night for the past year. Sweet dreams, baby girl, Ruth said, kissing Penny's forehead. Sweet dreams, Mommy. Thank you for never stopping your search for me. Thank you for never stopping your belief that I would find you. Ruth turned off the light and left Penny's door cracked open, just the way her daughter liked it. Deny.
Hallway. Ruth paused to look at the family photos that covered the walls.
Pictures of Penny as a baby, school photos, vacation pictures, and new photos from the past year of their family together again. At the end of the hall hung the newspaper article about the Children's Courage Awards. But right next to it was something even more precious, a drawing that Penny had made showing their family holding hands under a sky full of stars. At the bottom of the drawing, in Penny's careful handwriting, were the words, "Love always finds a way home." Ruth smiled and headed to her own bedroom, where David was reading a book about helping families heal from trauma. "Good day?" he asked, putting down his book. "The best," Ruth replied, climbing into bed beside him. Outside their window, the stars shone brightly over Millbrook. In houses all around town, families were tucking their children into bed and feeling grateful for another ordinary, wonderful day together. The pink recording toy sat quietly in its memory box, surrounded by other treasures from a childhood that had been interrupted but never truly lost. It had done its job perfectly, carrying love across impossible distances and bringing a family back together. The last message it would ever receive was the whisper of a mother's voice, spoken not into its speaker, but into the air around it. "Thank you, little pink toy, for keeping us connected when everything else failed. Thank you for proving that love is the strongest magic of all." And in the silence that followed, if you listened very carefully, you might have heard the faint sound of a child's laughter, not sad or scared, but joyful and free, like the voice of every lost child who had finally found their way home. The search was over. The family was whole, and love had won. What an incredible journey of love, hope, and never giving up. Penny and Ruth's story shows us that a mother's love truly can overcome any darkness. Where are you listening from today? Drop your location in the comments below. I love hearing from our amazing listeners around the world. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories of kindness, courage, and the power of love. And don't forget to click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another inspiring story that will remind you that miracles can happen when we never stop believing. Thank you for listening, and remember, love always finds a way home.